I'm Arden 13.
Welcome to our show, World Tiger.
Building Dragon.
Today we are continuing with the World Anvil Summer Camp prompts.
Summer Camp is a program set up by the World Anvil team to promote the community as well as world building in general.
There'll be 33 prompts all throughout the month of July, so if you're looking to win some prizes for your submissions, go check it out.
World Anvil is a free in-browser tool that has everything that a world builder would ever need.
They also have some incredible subscription options.
Totally affordable, totally worth it. Please go check it out if you're interested. But in any case, on to the prompt. What is the prompt?
Today we have to describe a religious leader and how their presence has affected the status quo.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah.
What world are you gonna use?
I'm still using Theatrim.
I think I'm gonna go back to Ellecrid.
Go
I
ahead.
think I have an idea for Ellecrid.
Okay, cool.
We do have a couple parameters that we are using for this segment. Each of us have 30 minutes to answer the prompt.
Each of our submissions have to be at minimum 300 words.
After the 30 minutes, we are going to come back together and share what we have come up with.
Yeah, some of our best ideas have come from collaboration.
Cool. So, without further ado, let's get to it.
Time skip!
Oh my god. I was not ready. So, 30 minutes later. Okay, so I'm gonna let you go first. You've been going first this entire time.
Mm-hmm.
You get to go first because I bamboozled myself.
Oh no!
I bamboozled myself again. And this is, I guess this is just gonna be a running theme.
Mm-hmm.
First one, I didn't write a myth. I wrote a lot of, smaller bits around a myth.
Mm-hmm.
Last time I did okay.
You did good.
No, I did good last time. This one, I got a little self-conscious about what I was doing.
Were you thinking too hard?
Yeah. Well, okay, so is there really any way to think too hard about this?
No, not really.
No, I'll talk about mine later.
Okay.
We'll get to mine.
So, the prompt was to write about a, if I could pull it up, it was
To write about a religious figure and how they have impacted the world.
Right. So, I wrote about one of the gods in my world, the god of knowledge, is called Obyn. And so I wanted to create kind of this this character or this religious figure that would almost be like the walking visage of Obyn.
Okay.
I call them the Allseer. So they are well versed in magic, in they're supposed to be super duper smart, super wise, this is the person. And so because of Obyn's far reach and kind of how his followers kind of affected the world, this Allseer is really, really well known throughout the world. So I created a character named, made it up on the spot, so let's figure this out. Nope, not in there. There you go. Xilryll.
One more time?
Xilryll. There you go.
Xilryll.
And she is a half-elf from one of the countries in my world called Son of Bahamut. And they are kind of like this country that really, really focuses on Obyn, and they're the closest to Obyn.
Their whole thing is the pursuit of knowledge.
Right. And so you got to... I wasn't expecting this. I knew that World Anvil was, they had all these questions and all these options that they would ask you. I wasn't prepared for the level of in-depth that it was going into.
Oh, yeah.
You start scrolling in personal history, and I wrote about kind of her start and how she got from her smaller province in that country up to being this huge figure in the whole world. But then I was scrolling down, it was education. Great, she started her education in the higher courts of this country, and that translated really well into her pursuit of knowledge through the Church of Obyn, and she was just kind of a natural at being able to connect bits and pieces together, and photogenic memory is something that I wrote down, where she was just able to read a book once and was able to latch on to everything that was in it, which is something that really helped her gain her power. But then you scroll down and you go to unemployment, accomplishments, achievements, and right now mine's all blank. It's not going to be blank when I submit my submission, but failures and embarrassments, mental trauma, like all these cool things that you would go into for a lot of your characters, but you don't have to.
What did you go into?
I did go into a lot more about her education and how she was brought up, and kind of some of her interests in language and history and math, and just really loving to learn, and that really helped her in her career moving up to this Allseer's position. Now, traditionally, I wrote in here, traditionally the Allseer's position is not on purpose, but it usually goes to elves just because they live longer, they're traditionally smarter, they're connected to magic more, so yes, it would make sense that it would go to them. But she's a half-elf, so it's kind of this new twist on it where, you know, she's still part elf, but, you know, it's new for the world, which is what was kind of part of her, how is she affecting the world? Well, you know, this position that was generally seen for elves is now
given to a half-elf.
Yeah. And so you're kind of given more attention to, you know, these half-breeds, and is it okay that that's happening? And yes, it's fine because she deserves this position, and the previous Allseer kind of gave his blessing and said, yes, no, seriously, she's got this.
She's the one.
Right, she's the one. She knows what she's doing.
She doesn't need any help.
Right. But yeah, I went into a little bit about how I want her to look physically. I wanted her to... she's older. She's on the older side. When she came into this Allseer position, she was late 90s to about 100 years old. And then she, at this current point that I'm writing the character, is going to be 155. So she's getting up there for half elf. So in the world, it will come into play, okay, who will be next? Now that we've opened this up to half-elves, who could be the next Allseer?
Who could be the next Allseer?
Right, will it go back to just being traditionally elves? Will it be another half-elf?
Mm-hmm.
God forbid it's an orc. You know, like, you just don't know anymore.
God forbid it's an orc!
You just don't know. But yeah, she, a little bit, she's taller. She's, I think I wrote on here, 5'8" or 5'9", but she's a little older, so she's slouched over. I did have her, I wanted to have her bald and just completely shaved. I don't know, I like that look for the Allseers.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point in here, they have to have a tattoos button or an option.
I think there's definitely, if it's not tattoos, maybe I'm thinking I'm sure I've seen either taboo or tattoos.
Facial features, identifying features.
Identifying features.
So yeah, I'll add something in there. Probably the blue fox, which is a symbol of Obyn. But yeah, that's kind of the religious figure
That's the one they came up with?
Made up.
So what part of the, you know, you kind of already touched on some of the things that you like filled in. What were some of your favorites to really talk about and look into?
I really enjoyed, I enjoyed how much they went into the education and unemployment. I didn't get to unemployment quite yet, but...
Unemployment or employment?
Unemployment, yeah. No, like, how their education would affect them and how their employment would affect them where they're at currently. Mm-hmm. And as well as the failures and embarrassments. I feel like we talk about our accomplishments a lot more and not as much into the failures and embarrassments and how that affects you as a character. But because I just started creating this character, I did find it hard to come up with failures and embarrassments for her. You know, I don't like creating the perfect characters.
Right, yeah.
But it was hard for me to come up with, like, where did she completely fail and miss the mark? How did that happen? Especially with her photogenic memory and her...
Photographic memory?
Yeah, words be hard after writing for 30 minutes. But...
I agree.
Yep, yes, but you get what I'm saying. Like, how would that kind of perfect memory, how could that fail?
Right.
So maybe drop some comments. Let me know something that What went wrong?
That's a good call to action. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
What went wrong? And
Cool.
yeah.
I really enjoy in your world and what you've told me about Theatrim. You've told me a lot about the gods and the deities, and I think at one point you were mentioning like an allusion to more of that kind of Egyptian mythology reference and so on and so forth. Not very many pantheons that I see, whether it's tabletops or just like writing in general, not very often do I see a god of knowledge really just like at the forefront.
Yeah.
And I think that really is a good testament to who you are as a person, with your very analytical mind, your very like knowledge is power sort of like mentality.
Right.
So I really, you have so many different gods in your world, and there are so many different things that I would love for you to explore and like verbally explore with people. But like, I enjoy the fact that you went with the god of knowledge, and I think that fits you very well. I think that's really cool. I like Obyn. Obyn's cool.
He's
about
pretty great.
The blue fox thing.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
What is the blue fox thing? What is that about?
It's just his
thing?
It's just his thing. God of knowledge, and he's sneaky, but not in a bad way. You see the fox is more cunning and smart, but it's almost seen as like in a good, playful light. Versus there are other animals when you think of them as cunning and almost maybe malicious
or,
with like his counterpart deity. Her animal is, I think it's just called the silver-tongued serpent. So that kind of tells you like exactly who she is and what she's about.
Yeah, fair enough. But I get the you can take that knife back out of my heart about serpents. They're great. I love serpents.
What did you write about? Tell us what went wrong.
So I bamboozled myself, and I bamboozled myself because I do this thing that I'm sure a number of people have done, but I overthink things and overanalyze sometimes. So this isn't a pity party for me. We're talking about what I actually wrote. So when we sat down, I had an idea for a character that I was going to write about, who was Arkhoshia, who is ostensibly to all of the players that play in my D&D setting, he is essentially Dragon Jesus.
Love him.
The Son of Bahamut, and like all of these things. And I sat down and I started writing about Arkhoshia. Like I had in the vignette, it was like this basically passage of scripture, which is basically praising Arkhoshia.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I'm really feeling it. And then I made the stupid mistake to like call over to Kat and say, hey, are you working on an original character, or did you make one up for this? Like, are you working on one that you already had, or did you make one up? And she's like, I made one up. And I was like, crap. So then I like got in my head and I was like, oh, I should probably make up one too. Like, just make a whole new character, which is why my brain hurts right now,
yeah.
which is why I'm sure your brain hurts right now. So as I'm like thinking, okay, because I had initially going into this, Arkhoshia was the one who won out for me. I have another character that I wanted to write about who is the leader of this cult, in essence. It's essentially a cult, the Brotherhood of the Eternal Flame. Basically, they're just pyromancers, right. But they're weird. And I wanted to write about their leader, but then I was going through, and during my like little writing on Arkhoshia, what I managed to do, I realized that they had the birth date, what year, what month, so on and so forth, and I was like, oh, I actually have that document in Google, so I'm going to go look at that Google Doc, and I brought up the calendar for Ellecrid, and all of a sudden I started scrolling down, like, trying to figure out, like, when Arkoshia's birthday was, because I was like, I know I wrote that one down, and I come across this name that I had never used, but I wrote it down in here for some reason, because I must have either liked the name, but it's, the name is Jackes, Jakkes, and there's a holiday dedicated to him because he's a saint. And the little blurb that I have about it is that he was the first Dragonborn to be killed during the Emancipation War. And I was like, I'm gonna write about Jackes. So I spent the rest of the time writing about Jackes, who I took the approach because I'm trying to like figure out. I literally had nothing written about him besides the fact that he was a saint and was the first Dragonborn to be murdered during this war. the way that Dragonborn exist in many worlds is different all around. Like, it's different from your world and my world. I remember we were talking about that earlier.
Right.
But in Ellecrid, a Dragonborn can be born from a dragon. They're just, like, the runt of the litter. It's just, like, a anomaly, a biological anomaly.
And
oopsies. But from that, Dragonborn can obviously mate together and create more Dragonborn. It's just the interesting thing that I thought about, rather than they just, like, came from another world or whatever. They're born of dragons. So Jackus was a green Dragonborn, born in a noble family of this order, this political power called the Council of Worms. And the way that I kind of posed his entire narrative is not so much like people know every single detail about Jackus, because it's not the fact that his life is more or less a mystery, it's the fact that his life was overshadowed by Arkhoshia.
Oh.
He was like one of the essentially disciples of Arkhoshia, one of the first disciples of Arkhoshia, so everything that he did was attributed to the glory of Arkhoshia. But the one thing that he is known for is his sainthood in sacrificing himself for Arkhoshia.
Right. He's
Basically,
known for dying.
He's known for dying. He's known for being the first one to die. Aside the fact that when I started writing it, and I was like, I don't want to just, write about this character whose entire life nobody remembers besides the fact that he died.
Right.
So he was born into a noble family. He served as a cupbearer for his family for the longest time, because Dragonborns are basically slaves to the dragons at this point in time, or like in those earlier days. But then when he was a little bit older and was given a chance to, he became a forge master and started like learning how to craft and become a blacksmith, which is was shortly thereafter is where Arkhoshia picked him up, and he became a forge master for Arkhoshia. So has some quality and has some skill.
Right. But he's not Dragon Jesus.
But he's not Dragon Jesus. So it's more or less his life is a tragedy, but it is celebrated. What I really enjoy, as we've kind of talked about in a couple of our prompts, is the perception that a lot of these people or these myths or these items have, what the perception is to the people that know about them.
Right.
And so to Dragonborn kind, all of the disciples, all the original disciples of Arkhoshia are like are all saints, essentially, like Catholic saints. But Jackus is the first. And so he has that clout of not only was he the first to die, but he was the first saint. And so, like, to the Dragonborn across the world, when they're, like, going through the rituals and rites, he has a day dedicated to him, like St. Patrick's Day, essentially. Whereas, the other saints do, but his is held in reverence because he was the first. He was not the first disciple, but he was the first to lay down his life. And then, but when you also look at that from the perspective of dragons, there are some dragons who care and like observe the Dragonborn holidays, because because further on in history, after the Emancipation War, after the Council of Worms dissolves, and after all of this calamity, some of them start to kind of turn around and be like, okay, so maybe Dragonborn aren't slaves.
Right.
Maybe they're people too. Topical ideas. But then there are also, I was thinking that probably the Green Dragon clan would observe Jackus as, I'm kind of teetering whether or not they observe him as a reverent figure or as like a betrayer.
Right.
I'm thinking they would more or less see pride in their breed rather than just like treachery. But again, it's
also green dragons, though.
But it is also green dragons. That is something that I would definitely see in terms of the pride for their breed. I would definitely see that for someone like red.
Right.
Or maybe black.
I don't know.
But for like greens, probably not.
Yeah.
They probably see him as like a not necessarily an antagonistic figure, but not somebody that they like. Everywhere they find a statue of Jack, it's just knock that down. I hate that guy.
maybe you could leave us some comments and let us know what you think. Should the Green Dragons see him as kind of their hero, or maybe the opposite, kind of as like a...
Now that you mention it, I really don't think they would see him as a hero.
No.
Because, yeah, no, I don't think that they would see him as a hero, just from the fact that he is a Dragonborn, which are lesser in their eyes, and he basically stood up against them and was like, I'm not gonna do this, Dad. I'm not.
Bye. Yeah.
The Dragonborn is not a slave.
Right. No.
Like,
no.
But that's as far as I got. Obviously, there's so much.
There's a lot
that you can write about.
I mean, like I said earlier, I knew, you know, with World Anvil, you can get into some pretty nitty-gritty details.
Rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole with a person.
With just a person, but, like, holy cow.
Like, I could spend...
It's a lot.
You could spend a half hour just writing the personal history itself.
Yeah, just one of these sections, you could just go on and on and on and on and on. Or you could do something very small. Like, honestly, I make a couple edits to this, and I could publish it. You don't need to know every single detail about this Allseer character. But it's still cool to have.
It's absolutely still cool to have, and I think that's kind of one of the, not necessarily one of the hang-ups that I get, but one of the things that gives me pause when I'm, like, working on World Anvil, like, files in general, or pages in general, because they're, like, details that I know that my players wouldn't necessarily know, and there's a secrets system where you can put in secrets and stuff like that, but at the same time, like, when I'm looking at a character like Jackus, it's almost better that even I don't have to know. I don't have to work out all of the details.
Right.
It's just like he is this figure who is revered in places and despised in others for what he did and for what he stood for and like how he is revered now. What's more important than like who Jackass actually is his holiday.
Right.
Is like is the role that he plays in the sainthood of Dragonkind. So that's kind of my thinking on that. But yeah, that's all I got.
Note to self: do not judge your writing on other people's writing. Do your own thing.
Do your own thing. If you have an idea and you're like, oh, that's really cool, and I want to run with that.
Go for it.
Go for it. Just go for it. Just go for it.
Well, that's all I had today.
That's all I can.
That's all you're good.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. Feel free to drop a comment down below and let us know which one of ours you liked better, or if you have your own ideas that you are willing to share.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit all of those buttons that everyone else bothers you about.
And go check out World Anvil if you're interested.
You guys have been great. Thank you so much. I'm Kat.
I'm Arden13, and I'm still waiting on that ramen.
We'll see you next time.
Bye!
Bye!